Welcome everybody on this very snowy Vermont evening. So we are very happy to have you here for our 6th annual evening of Bird Tales. This is a tradition to have bad weather on the evening of Bird Tales. All 6 years, I think we are 6 for 6. So we used to have this live. The last 2 years, we have been having our Bird Tales via Zoom. So luckily for the last 2 years, we haven't had to worry about the weather. And I think possibly we have a really big audience tonight because everybody's just kind of shut in and needs something to do. So welcome. Thank you for attending. We are very happy to have you here. My name is Julie Filiberti, and I am a member of the Friends of Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge. And I want to introduce you to our friends group for those of you who might not be familiar with what we do. Basically, we're a nonprofit group that supports the refuge in whatever way we can. We like to promote the refuge through public outreach and have educational events and fun events like Bird Tales this evening. That's one of the things we like to do. We conduct monthly bird monitoring walks on one of the trails at the refuge, and be happy to have you guys join us for one of those. They're always, well, this month it was pretty cold. We had to suspend it 3 times because of the negative temperatures, but we finally got it done. We also donate funds to support education on the refuge to bring in school children when we can. We give financial support to the refuge when it's needed, and the federal budget doesn't necessarily support it. And we give money and assist the refuge in acquiring grants for invasive species control, and really work with the refuge manager to provide any assistance that he thinks would be helpful for the operation of the refuge. We're always looking for new members. So if you are interested in also supporting one of the only 2 refuges, wildlife refuges in Vermont, we encourage you to go ahead and check out our website and become a member of the Friends. There's a place right on there where you can join. So on that site, you will also find our calendar that lists all the things that we do. Our bird monitoring walks are on there and any other events that we're holding. I'd like to bring 2 of those to your attention. On Thursday, March 24th, we're going to welcome Spencer Hardy from the Vermont Center for Eco Studies. And he's going to be here telling us everything we ever wanted to know about the wild bee population in Vermont. He's been part of the wild bee survey that they've conducted and have really got a lot of information about the bee populations and what's going on. So the ticket window for that is open, and the link to that should be on our website if that's something that you would like to join us. Again, that was March 24th. And then in April, when spring rolls around, we are going to be co-sponsoring an event with the Green Mountain Audubon Society. And we're going to have a talk about the timber doodle, or the American woodcock. And that's the bird that kind of shows up at the beginning of April and lets us know that spring has arrived with its wonderful twilight aerial displays. So we will find out everything that you ever wanted to know about the timber doodle and its migration. So you can find links to both of those events on our website if you want to check that out. Before we get started tonight, I would like to introduce our refuge manager, Ken Sturm, to tell you a little bit about the refuge if you have never been here before. So Ken, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome everybody. It's so nice to see so many people joining us virtually. We usually do this live, as Julie mentioned, and always in bad weather. So we're hitting every cylinder right now. So I first of all want to say thank you to the Friends of Missisquoi, and you guys have always been incredibly important to the refuge, supporting us. Julie outlined all the ways that the Friends have helped us out over the years, and It's just a really important component of how we do work as the federal government, is to engage volunteers and members of the Friends. They can do things for us that we can't do as the federal government. So we really appreciate all the support. And again, I really, if folks are not members of the Friends, I would encourage you to check out the website, learn a little bit more about the Friends, and consider becoming members, because it really strengthens the whole organization and the whole refuge. Missisquoi, as Julie mentioned, is one of 2 refuges in Vermont. We were, however, the first. And tomorrow, believe it or not, is the refuge's 79th birthday. And so it's a pretty cool thing to have bird tails kind of coinciding with almost the birthday of the refuge. So I just encourage you guys to explore the refuge, check out our website, look at our trail map, go on a bird walk with the Friends if you can, and really get to know us, because we're kind of tucked away in the northwest corner of Vermont. A lot of people, even in our local community, don't even remember that we're open for public access. So it's a wonderful place to be. We permit snowshoeing and cross-country skiing on our trails, and I've seen a few people cross-country skiing lately. It's a great opportunity to get out and see wildlife in the winter and tracks. So and last thing I want to say is thank you for all of our presenters tonight. Thank you for sharing your information, knowledge, and enthusiasm about birds. Really enjoying having this event, and I look forward to hearing all of these great bird tales. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Ken. So like Ken said, we are here tonight to hear some great bird tales from some of Vermont's local photographers this year. So photographing birds and other wildlife is a passion for each and every one of them, because I seem to know them all personally. The photos they take are pretty outstanding, and I am definitely looking forward to hearing their stories just as much as you are. So as we go on tonight, we ask that if you have any questions during any of their presentations, if you could just jot those down in the chat, and we'll try to have time at the end of all the presentations where we can address those questions. And I think everybody should be here to be able to answer them. Up first this evening, we have Angie. And Angie, I've known for many years. She lives in Milton, and she has spent considerable time with some very special creatures on her very own property. And she's here tonight to share some of their stories. So welcome, Angie. Thank you. And go ahead and take it away.
Hi, Julie. Thank you. All right. So hopefully I'm going to do this right. I'm going to hit share screen. Ready. So thank you all for having me here tonight. As you can see, my bird tale is about the owls of Hardscrabble. First of all, my little disclosure, my photos were taken with a 200 to 500 millimeter lens, and I always practice a safe distance from them. And if at any time I've ever felt that I was annoying something, I've simply left. But because I walk in my woods, I've been here for 10 years, walking 3 dogs every day. The creatures of our property seem to have gotten very used to us. So without further ado, I started seeing owls as soon as I moved here 10 years ago. But this particular year, 2020, was not only the year of COVID, but a very special time for me, because one morning on April 4th, I was out walking my dogs and I happened to notice an owl in a tree. And it doesn't take me long or much thought for me to go back out there right away with my camera after I bring the dogs in to sit with an owl for a little while. I've been known to sit with birds for 8 hours at a time. So April 4th, this was a bird that I started seeing sitting in a tree one day. If you've seen any of my photographs, I think birds perched is just wonderful. But when you spend so much time with them, you have a lot of perched birds. So I do try to go for slightly different pictures. And this would be no exception. Spending so much time with a bird, I just have seen pretty much everything. I've seen the preening, I've seen the stretching, I've seen the pooping. And as you can see, I also catch them expelling their pellets. That seems to be my little niche that I really try to always anticipate when an owl is going to expel and get it in motion. So this was one of the things that I had noticed. It didn't take me long to realize this little guy who was out first thing in the morning had a very, very set routine every day. And this was another kind of fun shot I liked because he'd slept a lot. And yeah, it's great to take a picture of an owl sleeping, but he was even able to sleep when all the other birds were bugging him. There would be titmouse after him. There would be blue jays in most cases. And they would, as you can see him right behind him, just taunt the poor little guy, but it didn't ever seem to faze them. And I'm sorry, I keep journals. So I have journals from the beginning of 2016. I always post what I see, what they're doing. And so I kind of got notes for everything. April 12th, I noticed that guy had brought in a mouse. And when I go out there, when I go out to see these birds, I usually will find myself, find a place that is just close enough, yet far enough to give them their space. And I sit down, and that seems to kind of make them more comfortable, I think, because I'm not standing and trying to look bigger than them. I just kind of settle down in the ground. And oftentimes it seems that they fly closer into me. I think they're as curious about me as I am about them. So on April 12th, I noticed that this guy was bringing food in, and I was like, that's interesting. I would think that, he'd want to keep that more in a secret area for him to gobble it. Well, on April 16th, I decided to go in a different route that day. In doing so, I was looking to the right in the tree that I knew that he would be in. Didn't see him, but out of the corner of my left eye, I noticed a bird flying towards me. It was this bird. And when I looked straight ahead of me, I said, oh my gosh, there's a cavity in the tree. And so oftentimes I start talking to myself or to them out in the woods. And I said, did you come from that cavity? Well, they didn't respond. So I said, okay, well, you know what? Flew into a tree nearby, and I went and I found my space to sit. That was near that tree, but to the side of it. I was rewarded with this. I was able to see her actually go back into her cavity. And so this I knew was always going to be a good position for me to be in when I was going out there, because I now realized there were two owls that I was watching. And now I understood why that male was there. He would be there for all morning hours. And what he would do around noonish would be he would head into the pine trees and he would preen. And that's when his day would really begin. That mouse that he was bringing in, it wasn't for him. He was bringing it to this little female. That same day, all right, so, I found it a little bit unusual that she even went to the cavity with me out there, because I think that they try to keep that pretty secret. But when she landed in there, she turned around and sat like that for, I would say, about 30 seconds, giving me that opportunity to take a picture of her. Again, I've walked my dogs in the woods for 10 years. So, it wasn't 10 years at that point, but all I can think of is that they had gotten used to me and they knew that I wasn't going to harm them. She never would go far from the cavity, but what was interesting is she would come out. Whenever I would go out there and sit, she would come out. But when I walked by with my dogs, she wouldn't come out. I brought my other half out with me one day to check them out. She wouldn't come out. The only time she came out is when I was by myself. So I kind of felt like she and I had built this little trust friendship. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to start sitting someplace else, because I've captured her going into her cavity. Now I wanted to see if I could capture her coming out. And it wasn't, when I take pictures of wildlife, it isn't so much to conquer another bird. It's just to learn about their behavior and get to know them. I feel like I can learn more from my personal experience with them than I can from a textbook. So I got this picture of her coming out and this another time when she was flying out. So this is April 25th. This marked a really special day because she was in a tree and all of a sudden, and like I said, whenever I was out there with her, she would never go off too far. But this one particular day, she flew off and she flew about maybe 200 yards away. And I saw her dive down into the ground. She came back up, she flew back over. She flew into a tree right next to me with this mouse in her mouth. While she was there, the male came in. He was carrying a mouse. He brought it to her. And if you look really closely with the mouse in her mouth, he gave her a second mouse. So now I've now witnessed 2 feedings on this one day where she has 2 mice in her mouth. But that wasn't going to be the end of it. He came in with a snake a little bit later. And this all happened probably within about 3 or 4 hours, I would say. After this snake, she gobbled it down. She sucked it in and ate it. He brought her a second snake. And then a little bit later, he was about maybe 100 or so yards away. I saw him dive down. He got himself a mouse and he ate it himself. So on April 25th, I watched 5 different feedings, which was very cool for me to see and just kind of watch. Then I was suddenly noticing with her, she too would sleep when she came out. And all I can think of is maybe that cavity was a little too cold. It was maybe a little, claustrophobic in there. And maybe that's why she came out. But what I had noticed is that she started keeping her mouth open. And I think it was for her waiting for her mate to bring her more food. She also started this noise that I had never heard before. And it was almost like a little whimpering sound. And hindsight, well, I'll explain to you what I thought it was afterward. Because on May 1st, I saw my first owlet. So what I think her whimpering was twofold. It was to let the male know where she was when she wasn't in the cavity so he could find her to bring the food. But I think it was also to comfort the owlets to know that she was not too far away from them either. So on this day, I actually saw 2 owlets. I was thrilled because back in 2016, I had discovered we had 3 owlets. So 4 years later, I was thrilled to know that we had 2 that I could actually watch from the moment that they had peeked over the cavity. But she said, wait, there isn't 2, there's 3. So on May 3rd, I actually noticed and counted 3 owlets in the cavity. So I was pretty excited. I know that, it's fairly common for them to have 2 to 3, but 3 seemed to be our lucky number in 2016. So I was excited to see it again in 2020. This was on May 10th. So this was only 7 days later, and they were just growing so fast. I had to kind of time it when I was going out to see them because of the way the cavity faced. It was facing the west. I had to have the sun shining just right, low enough so that it would brighten them up so I could see them. And but they were just changing so fast. Every day they looked so different. And what was pretty interesting too is I would start seeing things on the cavity entrance. And you can see a flicker feather here. And I'm not quite sure what this feather is. It was black and gray stripes. So I'm not quite sure what that was. And then on another occasion in a future slide, you're going to see there was a blue jay feather. So it's pretty cool to see that I knew what they were being fed, what they were eating. One particular day, I noticed, and it was around this time, I noticed one of the babies inside the shadow, and it was playing with what looked like a piece of bark. It wasn't. It was a chipmunk, and it was actually trying to swallow it whole, even though the chipmunk was its own size. It didn't succeed, obviously, but it was pretty interesting to see. What I had been noticing at the very beginning was a lot of mice going in there being fed to them. Now we're talking May 11th, just a day after that picture. And now you can see how big the owlet was already getting. And what I sort of discovered on this day is that there seemed to be one that may have been born the day before the other two. This one was oftentimes by himself, while the other two seemed to remain together. But look at how quickly, within just 8 days, they had grown. The male kept bringing in food. As I said, I saw a lot of mice coming in at this point of time, and I knew that there was birds being brought in and chipmunks. And there's that little mouth open again, just waiting to be fed by the parents. And he was getting stronger and stronger every day. And it was just so cool. It's always so much fun when you see like a little person doing big person things, and same thing with the owlet, to watch them do the things that you see so often as an owl. It's so fun. And he was just growing. He was becoming an owl, and he was getting stronger and stronger every day. And here would be the other two that I told you about. They always seem to be together, and you'll see in a lot of the pictures, it's two and then one. And the only solution I have is, because it seemed to be a little bit more advanced than the other two, that one had been born maybe a day or two before. And then finally I got to see all three of them together. And that was what I was waiting for. I just couldn't wait to start seeing them. And here's the blue jay feather that I was telling you about. So I knew that obviously they had been fed a blue jay right around that time. Then this would be the last day that I would see them as a trio together. This was May 16th. Again, I first saw them on May 1st. May 16th was when this picture was taken. May 17th was a Sunday. I went out about 9 o'clock in the morning. I went out every single day, as you can imagine. I would spend hours. May 17th, I went out in the morning, and look at what I found. The older one was out of the cavity. And what was interesting, I would say he was probably about 100 feet or so away from the cavity. That log was on the ground, maybe a foot or two above the ground. And it was like he was waiting for me to come, because I had gone through a certain way to get to them. And there he was, just waiting. So obviously I did want to go and see where the other two were. Whoops. And there they were. They were still in the cavity. They weren't ready to leave yet. So that little dude was all by himself. So I went back to him. And as we all know, owls can't fly when they first leave their cavity. Once they do leave their cavity, though, they're gone. They're not going to ever go back to that cavity. They're going to start becoming an owl. You probably all know the term branching, because they can't fly. They have to depend upon their legs and their talons, their legs, their wings, and their beak. So he started branching up this really tall tree using every part of his little body. And he had to rest a lot, obviously, because this is really hard work. But the whole idea is that he's strengthening every part of his body, especially his legs, because that's what he's going to depend upon to grab his next meal, or his meal eventually, I should say. So it took him about 2 hours, I believe it was, for him to get to the very top. He thought he was at the top here. He wasn't. He still had a ways to go. So he had to backtrack a little bit, but he would eventually make it to the top. I did leave for the afternoon, but I was so worried about him because I didn't know I was so afraid of being overnight. He was going to be exposed now to the real world. So at 7 o'clock, I went out, and there he was at the very tip top of the tree where I had left him earlier in the day. And all I could do was hope that he was going to be there the next morning. Next morning, guess what? The cavity was empty. So now my search began. If I wanted to find owlets, I needed to search. And sometimes it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. This will give you a perfect example of what I had to look for. The foliage was coming out, and they would go to the very top of the trees in some cases. So it was literally looking for a needle in a haystack. What I had learned from my owls in 2016, I started mimicking their call, and in doing so, they would respond to me. So I was able to find them. And in this case, that's what started happening with these owls as well, is that I could call them and they would respond. And it's almost because they were so used to seeing me every day, it was almost like they wanted to be found. I kind of feel, maybe that's my own naive or ego, in hopes that they enjoyed seeing me as much as I enjoyed seeing them. But we all know that they still could not feed themselves. They still had to respond. They still had to rely on their parents to feed them. Now, at this point, though, because they're bigger, a mouse wasn't going to cut it for all three. What would happen is I was seeing a lot more chipmunks coming in to be being fed to the babies. And what would happen is she would kind of go someplace nearby where they were in the trees, and it was really going to be up to them to get to her. They still were not flying at this point, though. They were still branching from tree to tree. It was not until May 20th that I actually saw them take their first little flight. And it was a little flight. It was just from one treetop to another. But it was finally flying on May 20th. Again, 20 days after being born. And so, again, like I said, if I was nervous every day. I wanted to make sure there was going to be 3 every day that I saw them, because I just worried about their predators in the woods. And like I said, sometimes I really had to search. But as I said, those 2 that were born, I think on the same day or together, even out of the cavity, would remain together often. This was a significant day too, May 23rd. May 23rd, 2016 was actually when I first saw the owlets together. So this was a special day for me too, because all 3 babies were on the same limb together when I first got there. They were at different parts of the tree. And the mother flew in with a chipmunk. And originally it was just the 2 on the left-hand side. And she was feeding the one closest to her. He seemed to be the superior one of the 2 and was getting most of the food, as the poor little guy to the furthest left was just kind of waiting. But then Mr. Mumbo Jumbo flew in, or walked over, the one who I thought was a little bit older, and was suddenly being given all of the attention and the meal. And just a little view of all of them looking. And then the little hot shot taking the chipmunk, the remains of the chipmunk, and the feast was going to be his for the remainder of the night. So that was a really cool night to actually watch that. Now, again, they're getting a little older, and we're now talking the end of May that I was going out. And so these are just kind of some fun pictures at this point. I just thought this was hilarious. How it was just such a great moment to capture. And I'm so happy I have it. But look at how beautiful. I mean, owls are beautiful, but I'll tell you what, an owlet at this stage, I think, is one of the most gorgeous creatures I've ever seen. And boy, what a fantastic gift to be able to capture these moments. Again, as I said, these 2, they were so joined at the hip. It was really amazing to watch. But May 31st, the parents are still very, very involved with their babies. They're still feeding them. They're still very dependent upon their parents. And so this was a really cool thing when I saw the male come into the female. And it was almost like they were posing for the picture. And then just, boy, you know, I have a hard time being convinced that animals don't have love for each other as we do for one another. Just watching this grooming session was just really pretty awesome. This was a fun day too, because this was the same day as then when I saw the parents, but a little later in the day. We have tree stands throughout the woods that are not ours, but if there's going to be a tree stand, this is what I think it should be used for, is an owl perch. So I just thought that was pretty funny that they were utilizing it, and I hope they pooped on it. And no, I'm not anti-hunting, by the way. Now we're just really at the point where I was going and just spending time with them every day, because I knew that our time together was going to be ending very soon. But this I loved because you really see how different they look. Owls have such unique personalities and looks, but because you don't usually see them together, you don't always see those differences. And this was really fun because I was able to see all three of them together again on the same limb. This was June 14th. So I was happy to be able to get this one last capture of them where they would be together. And again, now I'm literally just towards the end. We're now talking end of June into July. And again, I'm spending nights calling and having them respond back to me. All-time favorite picture. I just think this is the sweetest picture, so I had to include it in my stories tonight. No words. And just like I said, at this point, I'm now just showing you just some of my favorites towards the end of the night. And just the sweetest little things. The best gift that I've probably been given in a very long time. Boy, if there's one thing great that came out of COVID, it was being able to have this opportunity to spend with these guys working from home. And then this was on July 28th. As you can see how much they have changed and become almost like little owls at this point. And you can see that he had actually gotten his own meal for the night and still had the blood on his beak. And this was the day that I made the decision that I now needed to say goodbye to them so that they could grow into owls and do what owls do without the interruption of a human being near them. And that's my tale for tonight.
Thank you so much, Angie. Those were precious. I love the one of it upside down. I think that was my favorite.
Oh, is that funny? Oh.
What an experience you had. That is, and you captured it so well. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight.
No, thank you guys for letting me do that. I hope I didn't bore anybody.
Oh, I'm sure you did not. All right. So next up, we have Sharon. Sharon also lives in Milton. But she spends a lot of time looking at her pond and capturing the birds there, but she also spends a lot of time at the refuge. And she's here tonight to share a few of those encounters that she's had up there. So Sharon, you can go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to do this tonight. It's I'm no bird expert, but I love talking about birds. So, and I'm Sharon Radke. I live in Milton, Vermont. I'm very lucky that I live on a 22-acre pond called Round Pond in Milton. And so I see all kinds of wildlife here. And, but I still travel around to different parts of Vermont to view birds. And the refuge has ended up being my favorite place. I began taking pictures of birds about 6 years ago. I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called pemphigus vulgaris, and I had to have some really nasty treatments. And so my husband bought me a camera and suggested that I start taking pictures of birds as a distraction. And so I started taking the pictures and I posted them on Facebook, and people said, wow, you take really good pictures of birds. And so that got me hooked. And so I started watching where other people were looking at birds, and I started traveling around to like Ferrisburg and to Dead Creek and all over. But I found myself, just ending up at the refuge all the time. and it became my happy place. It's during the pandemic, my husband and I would take a drive every day, and we end up here more often than not. So I use a Nikon. Well, my first camera was a Panasonic Lumix, and I used that for about a year. But I wanted something that I could stand back and take pictures of birds in a good distance away. So I got a Nikon P900, which has the super zoom on it. And I, honest to God, can take pictures of birds on the other side of our pond with this camera standing on our dock. It's like amazing. I also have another Nikon of 5600, but I use it much less frequently. So the very first bird that I saw at the refuge was a snowy owl. Okay, so let's go to the snowy owl, since we took like so long trying to get in there. I had heard that there was a snowy owl out on the refuge, and actually I heard it was out on Champlain Street and Lakewood Road, but they weren't telling me exactly where it was. They just saw it in the area, which is good. I didn't want them to tell me exactly where it was. And so I went out and I saw it. Well, the first time I went out, I didn't see anything. And so I was really disappointed. And then the next day I said, well, I'm going to go later in the day. Maybe they'll be hunting then. And sure enough, I saw this one. It was sitting on the barn on the corner of Champlain Street and Lakewood Road. And then it flew over and sat on one of those big bales of hay. And I sat there and I was in total awe. I sat there the whole time it was there, just looking at it. We were sitting in our car on the road, and it was in the field. So I had hoped I would get a better picture and like a whole group of pictures, but this was it. And I was just so thrilled. So that was my very first bird I took out on the refuge picture. This one was the second one. And we drove out there one day and I heard it first. It was such an unusual sound. I was just like so in awe of it. And then I looked in the field and I saw something moving, and the American bittern was in the field right across from the info center. And I think there was another one, but I didn't see it because I heard them kind of talking to each other. And so that was very cool. That was probably my first bird on Tabor Road that I saw. Then I did, the next one is, hold on a minute, let me just, wait a minute. So the next bird that I saw there, and what I want to say is I've never seen any of these birds anywhere else. So that's the thing that makes this, the refuge so special to me, is that I have actually never seen, some of the birds at the end that I'll talk about I've seen, but all these birds I've never seen anywhere else. So one day I went out and we're taking a walk, and I saw these birds all in the field, and I heard them and I went, what are those? And so I figured out it was a bobolink. Well, actually it was a lot of bobolinks. And so my husband and I now, we just love them so much that we take rides out there during the summer months, and we're really disappointed when they're gone. It's like we drive out like each week, and we just love seeing them, like, and it's not easy to take their picture because they're flying in and out of the grass, and but we really enjoy going to see those. This is another bird I've never seen anywhere else. It doesn't mean it isn't anywhere else, but it's the only place I've ever seen it. And the first time we saw the northern Heria, we had no idea what it was. I had to go home and look it up because I had no idea what it was. And the thing that's so interesting about it is that first of all, it's hard to get a picture of it because they keep moving across the field. And so you have to kind of like drive your car. You feel like you're chasing like a tornado, like down the road. And then, they're always way back. So I was just lucky enough to get this shot when it was way back in the field. And so I think I've seen one every year since that. It's been about 3 times since the beginning of the pandemic. And we always enjoy seeing it. My husband goes, oh, there's the Harrier. And so we follow it. Okay, the next one is the Kestrel. I had seen a Kestrel at the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences down in Quechee, and I just thought it was the most adorable bird. I just was astounded, first of all, how little it was, and then, of course, its beautiful colors. And so when I saw one out at the Refuge, I was just stunned, because I loved seeing it in the wild, and just hung around on the wires out there for a while. And I've never seen one. I only saw one once. I haven't seen any since. So I don't know if that's something that you have them come in and spend time like bobolinks. So the next bird that I saw for the first time, had no idea what it was a rough-legged hawk. And I knew what it was. I had seen one at Vin's also, but then when I saw the bird, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. But I really loved the rough-legged hawk when I saw it at Vin's, because it had such beautiful colors, and I wish I had gotten a better picture of it. But it was very thrilling to know that I saw it in the wild, and I watched it hunting for a while. And so I'd have like close-ups at Vin's of these, and they have such beautiful feathers, but that was very exciting for me to see it in the wild. Okay, now we have ducks on our pond all the time. I mean, all kinds of ducks. I see them all the time in the spring and early summer. But we were driving down the road right across from the info center, and their field was filled with water. And I saw these ducks, and I went, what are those? I mean, at first I thought they were mallards, but they're blue-winged teal ducks. And I just thought they were absolute. Look at the male, how gorgeous he is. And we just sat there and watched them for a while. It was just amazing to see them. I actually parked in the parking lot, walked over, and kind of hung out on the side of the road to watch them for a while. So those are all the birds that I've seen that on the Refuge that I've never seen anywhere else. But then there's some other ones that I've seen there, but they were really important birding experience for me. The great blue heron. One of my favorite things to do at the Refuge is to walk down to the platform. And I don't know if there's like a specific name for it, but I walk down the pathway and to the platform and just kind of hang out there. And one day I went down there and I thought, boy, there's nothing here today. And then, so I walked back, and then I looked over and I went, oh my gosh, that bird looks just like a tree. And I had to click. I couldn't believe how, and it didn't move at all. So you wouldn't have even known it was there unless you looked really carefully. So that was pretty cool. And we have blue herons here in our pond all the time. So I see them all the time, and we have a marsh area, and so I do see them. But this was it was special because it was like, first of all, it was in a different setting, but I just was amazed by how camouflaged. Green heron. So we have them in Round Pond. We didn't have them this past year, but for a couple of years they were coming here, and we would go out in our canoe and we would see them along the shore and stuff. But one day I went to the platform at the Refuge, and again I went down there, and it looked pretty quiet. And I looked over, and there was this guy or girl, I don't know, but I just thought it was like so cool how the feathers look. I call it all gussied up because I just think it's so beautiful. And I've never seen one again since I was there that time. And then this is my last picture. And it's actually one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. It was taken on Tabor Road. It was on my birthday last February 26th. And we parked in the parking area right near the platform across the street. And I walked out, and there was this owl sitting there on the tree. And I went, wow. And so I said, well, boy, am I lucky on my birthday. And then it started snowing and I went, oh my gosh. It was like it was like such a magical experience being with the owl alone in the snow. So I think that's why it's my favorite picture. So that's all that I have to share. But I just wanted to tell you that I just, it's one of my favorite places. It's my happy place. We go there at least once a week. And it's about an hour from our house. You know, we go through the islands or through St. Albans, but it's always such a beautiful trip out there. And then I usually see, every time I go, I usually see at least one bird. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. You can definitely hear the delight in your voice at those birds. So thank you for sharing them.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter is here, but she wasn't sure that she was going to be able to make it. So what she did was create a video. So this is something that Sandy has given us. She lives up in the Northeast Kingdom. And she's going to be sharing her year of birds with you. And so to do this, I'm going to have our techie behind the scenes, Rich. He's going to share his screen and show you Sandy's birds.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy Cutting, and I'm located in the Northeast Kingdom. One of my passions is photographing birds from my home. I always have a nice variety of birds outside my window. I have an apple tree right next to the kitchen sink window that attracts lots of birds. It's always so much fun to take pictures of all of them. The photos I'm featuring today are started out with January of 2021, and they'll work their way right through to the first part of January of 2022. Most of my photos are taken through the window, but sometimes I am able to open the window and take much sharper images that way. Sometimes I'll use a sheer piece of fabric to drape over the curtain rod, and then I can hide behind that and it conceals my camera on a tripod too. That works really well. I started January with common redpolls, including this one of my horse photobombing one of them by rolling in the background. Then we'll see a female cardinal. She's got a snowy backdrop, which really adds to her color. And of course, the blue jays. Sometimes the Cooper's hawk come in looking for an easy meal. Nothing's prettier than a northern cardinal during a snowstorm. Blue jays are one of my favorite birds to photograph. They are so colorful and animated. They cannot refuse a peanut. If you want to get great pictures of a blue jay, put out some peanuts. More colorful winter birds include these evening grosbeaks. They're always a welcome treat every year. Here we have next up is a mourning dove, followed by a European starling chasing a blue jay off of the post that has the peanuts on it. A few more regular birds include the black-capped chickadee, the white-breasted nuthatch, a few more shots of the evening grosbeak. Next up we have another shot of a common redpoll, the bright colors from the male. Then we have a wood duck flying over, followed by a red-winged blackbird who's letting us all know what he thinks. Next up, we have a yellow-bellied sapsucker, a male purple finch, a song sparrow, a dark-eyed junco, a northern flicker, a pine warbler, a white-throated sparrow, and a chipping sparrow that's sitting on a froze-over fountain. Come spring, my apple tree really makes a beautiful place for all the birds to land, including this pine siskin, a male northern cardinal, ruby-throated hummingbird, a blue jay, a white crowned sparrow, a male, and a male American goldfinch round out all the colors. One morning while out in the yard, I spotted this brown thrasher sitting near my garden. Shortly after that, I had an adult rose-breasted grosbeak, another northern flicker, and then mallard ducklings on the pond. The female mallard put on quite a show, trying to distract me from her ducklings. Next up was a rose-breasted fledgling being fed by his father, or her father. More pictures of a brown thrasher. They are such an attractive bird. Followed by a young blue jay trying to get a drink out of the top of my fountain. I took these pictures of the ruby-throated hummingbird while using my sheer fabric as a blind. I was able to sit in a chair in the living room while I watched the hummingbirds. Next up is a chestnut-sided warbler, an American redstart. And then this merlin was hovering right above me while I was out walking my dog. It's always fun when the warblers and the vireos start showing up. Even the yellow rump warbler took a bath in my fountain. Next is a few photos of a broad-winged hawk, followed by trail camera footage from my camera in the woods showing the young hawks. Quite amazing footage. I'll just be quiet and let you enjoy the video clips. I hope you enjoyed those young hawks as much as I did. Up next is a Scarlet Tanager. They are not as colorful as the adult males, but they're still a really pretty bird. I've often said the tufted titmouse is my favorite bird, and that still holds true. Next in line, we have a female northern cardinal along with a red-breasted nuthatch. In the blink of an eye, we're back to winter again with the blue jay and American tree sparrow, a male northern cardinal and a female northern cardinal. Then we have a mourning dove and a black-capped chickadee along with the dark-eyed junco. Once again, the evening grosbeaks have returned. I only saw a few, but they are here again. And we have a American goldfinch and a beautiful northern cardinal in a snowstorm. I hope you have enjoyed the view from my window in the Northeast Kingdom. Thanks for watching. You can see more of my trail camera wildlife videos on Vimeo.
All right. Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. Never realized white-tailed deer wag their tails as much as dogs do. Okay. Our next presenter is not only a photographer, she is also an exquisite artist. So we're going to hear from Claire. Claire lives in Georgia, and she has a story to tell where she is going to share both of those passions with us. So go ahead, Claire, you can take it away.
So I'm going to share basically my journey from photography to wildlife painting. And there you go. So a little bit about my background. As long as I can remember, there's been two passions in my life. The first is a love of watching animals and how they interact in their environment. And the second is an obsession with art. At an early age, I knew I wanted to turn my love of these things into a career so I could spend as much time possible following my passion. So eventually, my goal for retirement is to have cultivated avenues to share my experiences through art using an assortment of mediums. And to accomplish this means, if I accomplish this, means I won't have to worry about retirement. I simply continue to do what I love. Accomplishing this goal has not been a straight line. Being a professional artist has always been my dream. After high school, I continued on to school. Once home, I started my family, became a stay-at-home mom and a freelance painter and a commercial artist as time allowed. I shifted careers to construction when I decided I needed a real job and for financial reasons and stability. And I worked in the construction field in various drafting trades for about 20 plus years. My last position was in the marketing department for a large construction firm And I landed their original online, I launched their original online presence and social media campaign. They still maintain their social media postings on a freelance basis to this day. Today, I'm a commercial artist and a photographer who enjoys both wildlife photography and painting. So, history of my work, my early work. I always wanted to paint and loved wildlife as a subject, but I became extremely frustrated a lack of reference to artwork. So many of my early pieces were illustrations in assorted mediums, including pen and ink and pencil. At this time in my career, I had customers in the screen printing industry, which lend itself to a lot of illustration work. Over time, I experimented with different subjects and different styles and mediums, but continued to struggle with originality. I didn't have the freedom of having my own photography to reference the subject matter, and I still found this extremely frustrating. So, I met a man named Gary Duffy. When I started a career with my current employer, it was in the position of mechanical estimator, and my new boss's name was Gary Duffy. Gary turned out to be more than just a boss. He was an accomplished photographer, a mentor, and a friend. He let me use his photography as reference for my paintings and gave me my first wildlife photography lessons. Gary wanted to retire to become a full-time photographer. He always was plotting his resources to plan the perfect time to retire. But not long after he took the step to retire, Gary got sick, and after a painful bout with cancer, he passed away. He managed to accomplish some spectacular photography with the time he had left, and he is deeply missed by his family and friends. And he remains a source of inspiration to me to this day, as well as a reminder to make the most of every day while you have the time. So, photography, my evolution through photography. So, just like I heard a couple of people talk, the pandemic had a huge effect on my life. So I made a conscious commitment to practice photography because of the pandemic. I knew I needed to do something positive in the face of overwhelming circumstances that I could see coming. Everyone's experience with COVID has been different, and my family has been directly affected. My mom, my dad, and my mother-in-law passed from COVID. And when the Canadian border closed, visits to my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandchildren were stopped for a period of time. So I tell this story because I made my commitment to go out and do daily hikes during this time. And I dedicated myself to doing something positive because I knew I'd benefit from the effort. So at first my photos were of scenery, but my interest progressed and I found beautiful things all around. When I was hiking, I was at peace. There were no problems. I just enjoyed the moment. So my evolution through photography. I shared my experiences in the daily social media posts, hoping I could help others get away from their daily problems as well. I created a 4-book series for my daily social media posts called Birds by the Season in Vermont. And I created 2 calendars, a 2022 Vermont Wildlife Calendar chronicling the beautiful wildlife that can be found in the state of Vermont. I frequented local hiking spots and began to see birds and animals on my adventures. The Missisquoi Wildlife Refuge has been an incredible resource for my local wildlife photography. The refuge has been an important part of my life for many years. I raised my family in Swanton and took my children on walks throughout the wildlife refuge on a regular basis. The networks of walking trails into the woods, meadows, wetlands, and other great wildlife viewing opportunities, and the waterways are fantastic places to spend an afternoon kayaking to see local wildlife. Here are some photos of my from some of my visits to the refuge. They show examples of some of the wildlife you can expect to see on the trail. Some of the animals you can expect to see include songbirds, fishing birds, foraging birds, raptors, muskrat, rabbit, deer, and many more local species of animals. And I'll let you just enjoy the video. I just love these animals. The greenies are just incredible. Look, the young eagles, the raptors are just beautiful. So I thought I'd share a couple of my favorite photos of all time. So the great horned owl. The first time I ever saw a great horned owl on a hike, I looked across the trees and saw what looked like a garden gnome sitting on the forest floor. I raised my camera and took a few shots and realized it was a newly fledged owl sitting amongst the leaf litter. As I walked away, the parents made their presence known to me as they watched me hike down the path, and I was able to get photos of them as well on the same trip. It's the first time I've ever seen one of these birds, and I walked away just high as a kite. So my next favorite would be the snow owl. I've taken a lot of pictures, but this bird in particular, as these birds migrate, they routinely travel through the farmers' fields on the Lake Champlain Basin. This year, I got to see one in St. Albans area. It was in a farmer's field for a time, and then it crossed the road and roosted on a telephone pole over my head and stared down at me. Every time I see a snow owl, it's just an incredible experience. And the third, one of my favorites is the Canada jay. The Canada jay is simply an incredible bird to see. Generally, you don't have to look for these birds. If you pass through their territory, they will find you. They're silent flyers, and their bold inquisitiveness can be surprising the first time you see them. In many places where I've seen these birds, they have readily perched and outstretched hands, and they are highly intelligent, entertaining, and very photogenic birds. Okay. So coming full circle, photos to painting. So for 2 years, I've been doing photography seriously. I have a long way to go with my photography, but now I've started to take a little time and go in-house and start painting some of the wildlife from my own photos. So it's been a time for changing things up a bit for me. By using my own photographs as reference for wildlife paintings, I have another avenue to share my experiences. I've just started, but I've already am enjoying the variety of reference my photos afford. As I spend more time in the studio and less time in the field photographing birds and animals, I hope I can sharpen my photography skills and become more efficient in selecting my subject matter. This photo is, and painting is I call it local vixen. Some foxes seem comfortable choosing dens close to humans. This little vixen raised her young on the shore of Lake Champlain, became a local celebrity for a season. My next painting is Barred Owl. Oops. In the coldest months of last winter, and those were some dark months for me, this little owl frequented a farmer's field, perched on the edge of a wooded lot to scout for rodents in the snow. And I got to spend a lot of time with this little guy. Pretty special little bird. This painting is called Heron on the Richelieu. So in Canada, up on the Richelieu River, there's a set of rapids that extend from St. John to Chambly, Quebec. Waterfowl are abundant there, and so it's a great spot for birders and photographers. This great blue heron is a regular at these falls and knows the exact spot in which to hunt for passing fish. That's also special because I get to go up and see my grandchildren when I'm visiting that area. So I want to end with a couple of stories, just fun stories of something that I had. So the first story is an American mink. I didn't know it was a mink. I didn't know what this was. So I was walking along a trail through a swamp and I could see a dark animal running along the water's edge. I lifted my camera and immediately started shooting. I was hoping I could get photos to identify it. I didn't expect what happened next. Not taking time to think, I was just shooting away. It rounded the curve and started across the ice straight towards me. As it came closer and closer, I was getting larger in my view frame. And before I knew it, it landed on my side of the bank and scurried straight for my feet. For the first time, I dropped my camera and said, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" And the little guy stopped and looked up at me and seemed to see me for the first time, and it quickly scurried off. So I'm going to play this video. It's a compilation of the photos I took that day. After it was over, oh, there we go. When I see these, all I can think of is how cute is this little guy. So after it was over, I was excited to see the pictures, but I did not know what this animal was. When I posted the pictures, a number of people identified this animal as a fisher cat, but it's not. I researched it myself and I know it's an American mink. I know also from being there. So the last story is river otter. I've been lucky enough, I don't even know how, to see a lot of river otters in the area. And so this story in particular, I love tracking animals in the winter. And you can see evidence of animals moving through spaces if you look closely, and you can get information about where the animal is, when it's moving, where it's going, and spend enough time tracking and you start seeing patterns. Otters use multiple dens at the same time and maintain a network of air pockets along the edge of the riverbank and under the ice, allowing them to travel unseen. Early one cold morning, I was walking along the riverbank and I saw lots of otter sign, but no animals near the den sites. So I continued walking. Then I heard bumping and tapping sounds. When otters are close, their sounds are unmistakable. I took cover behind the root of a fallen tree, and the bumping and cracking sounds got louder and then crack. An otter popped his head through the ice. Then on the opposite side of the riverbank, another otter broke through, and then another. Being dawn, it was low light conditions, but I did my best to get the shots. The first otter looked around. I'm pretty sure it spotted me, and then submerged, and the other two followed suit. I assume they all continued down the river to their den. Seeing them pop through the ice was an incredible experience. So these are two stories I wanted to share to tell you why I love what I do, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Your artwork and your photography are both just beautiful. So
Well, thank you.
thank you for sharing your story. So our final presenter this evening is Matthew. Matthew is from St. Albans. And to get the amazing shots that he does, he has to spend quite a bit of time down in the mud. So he's going to share just what goes into that perfect shot of a shorebird. So, I think you're still sharing there. There we go. Okay. Ready, Matthew?
So good evening, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to jump on here and talk to you about some shorebird photography. I'm going to focus this evening just on the shorebirds and really just on this recent season. Shorebird photography really starts usually about August timeframe and runs for a couple of months. During that period of time, we have a lot of migrant birds that come through. I'm going to stop over in the Lake Champlain area. I got a little bit of a snippet of this in 2020. And I knew going into the 2021 year, I was really going to want to spend a lot of time with shorebirds. There's kind of three things I want to hit on for this evening. First is a little bit on ethics, a little bit on the day in the life, and I'll spend most of the time talking about my approach to photography, especially in this past year. The ethics piece of this, I think one is understanding every impact or every interaction you have has an impact with the birds, with wildlife in general. If anybody's been out in nature for more than 2 minutes, you're going to flush a bird. You're going to run into different animals that you didn't know were there. Those kinds of things happen. I think what's important is to learn from it, understand when those interactions can be negative, and work to avoid that. Also, leaving it the way you found it. There's been some times I've gotten up and walked away from a situation where I thought that my presence was bothering somebody. That's personal decisions. You're going to have to make judgment calls, that kind of thing. I've wrote some other notes on here and you can feel free to read it, but the final thing I'm going to mention that's probably most related to photography is when you do bird photography correctly in the ethical sense, birds are most comfortable, and I think that comes across in the image. When birds are highly alerted, when they're stressed, I think that comes out in the image as well. And so I spend a lot of time approaching a situation carefully. When I get there early in the morning, I'm going to use binoculars usually to kind of look through things, especially in the dark, try to figure out where things are and know where I can approach in a way that's not going to bother them too much. Once I've kind of gotten that and I know what I want to do, I know Julie mentioned I'm often down in the water, I'm in the mud, I'm on the rocks, kind of getting down low, and that tends to really help. They really respond to things that are above them. They're used to getting predated by things like merlins and peregrine falcons, and they're always looking up. If you kind of get down to that eye level, they tend to appreciate that, I think. So a I just thought I'd throw this out there. So a few things to kind of understand. It's really kind of an investment to get out to some of these places and do this right. And I kind of threw out some time frames here based on just the average day during that period of time in that September time frame. If I'm going out to the mouth of the Missisquoi, I mean, I'm up pretty early. I'm gonna get in the kayak in the car, ready to go, get out there and launch. I try to get most places, if I'm going to shoot, probably about half an hour before the sun comes up. I want to get a lay of the land, see what's out there, and be able to kind of line up in case there's something out there worth getting a good image of. After about shooting for an hour and a half in the morning, I'm usually done. If there's cloud cover, I can keep going. If there's not, I may spend some time just birding, just enjoying what else is out there, put the camera down for a while and enjoy it, and then come on home. Reverse in the evening. I spent a lot of time in Missisquoi for this past shorebird season. Also spent quite a bit of time at Delta Park down in Chittenden County. Same thing, kind of in reverse. It's a little bit of a hike. It's a couple feet of water to walk through if you're going out to the island, especially this year. 2 years ago, I think water levels were a lot lower. So you kind of got to be in it and ready to get a little dirty sometimes. But get out there, spend some time kind of getting the lay of the land. I like to shoot that last hour or so of daylight, and I'll usually try to get there about a half an hour before that to get ready for it in case something else out there really pretty. So what I've done is tried to kind of separate, at least for my own sake, the birds that I think are probably a little bit more common or a little bit easier to find in Vermont, and the ones that are probably less common, not rare in any ABA sense, but just maybe just not as few or don't come through in quite the same numbers. I spent some time in the last couple of years probably getting a lot more ID shots, and especially the common ones. And so kind of have that under the belt. This past year, I was thinking more about being creative in the sense of approaching bird photography. That's a lot easier, I think, to do with some of the common species where you see them all the time. Admittedly, that can be challenging when you see a species that you don't get to see very often. If you're not used to seeing the Hudsonian godwit and one comes in, creativity is usually not the first thing you think of. The first thing you think of is mashing that trigger and getting the photo, because it's exciting. You get to see something that's not there all the time. So what I've done is kind of progressed, I think, personally to work more at making creative shots and not necessarily focus quite so much on just getting the ID shot. I have a lot of those in my pocket. The photo in the background here, I won't name names, but it's actually another photographer in the background. You can see laying in the mud. And it's one of the just coolest feelings when you're laying there and just like a flock of sanderlings or sandpipers come between you and just running around, just feeding, just not caring that you're there. So here's kind of a progression of a few things. Next few slides, I'll show kind of a progression just personally that I've gone through to kind of push myself in the creative sense. And I think shorebirds are great for that. They're a little bit more reliable in where they're going to be, some of their behaviors. And because they're typically out in the mudflats and in the water, you have a lot more light to work with. And light is often a source of creativity for a lot of this. So this is kind of a just front and center, pretty standard front light set of shots. You got a few here that you may recognize, like the lesser yellowlegs, the black-bellied plovers, the Hudsonian godwit, and a dunlin. I actually watched this dunlin for about 15 minutes just sleep. He had his eyes closed almost the entire time. From there, there's a few things that, and I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but each one of these deserves its own conversation. A few things to kind of push on that I tried a little bit differently this year. One is getting multiple birds in frame. Really easy to get lots of birds in frame, really hard to do that meaningfully and make the shot work out. So I included a few here that I thought were kind of cool. You got a few of them flying. I like the idea of this one on the right where you've got the black-bellied plover kind of overlooking. I think those are probably semi-palmated sandpipers below them. I had only ever seen a stilt sandpiper once in my life before this past shorebird season. And we had several pass through, and I had time to spend, actually spent 4 or 5 straight days with the same group of stilt sandpipers, just taking a lot of different angles with them. So getting a couple in frame was kind of cool. And then the bottom right is actually the greater and lesser yellowlegs together, which is kind of cool, just comparison of species. Other thing that really appeals to me personally is getting more environment into a frame. And this is something I worked consciously to get better at this past year. It's something I'm going to continue working on because it really appeals to my just personal taste as well. Trying to get not necessarily just the hard crop front and center, really nice detailed shot of a bird, but also trying to capture a piece of where they live and what the conditions are and way and how they live. So you got a snipe here. That was actually right at the launching point for the up at Campbell's Bay. The top right one is up at the mouth of the Missisquoi as well. That's right as the sun is coming over the top of the trees over the delta. Bottom two are taking the delta park. Another piece that I've really gotten into this past year, and I learned a lot, and I still have a long ways to go, is backlighting shots. These are some just pretty standard silhouettes, kind of give a little bit different take, just trying to get creative with some birds that I was seeing a lot of. Once you see them, you get a lot of shots taken from the front, and you know what they look like. You start playing around to see what else you can do. So that middle one is probably my favorite here. I like the two birds in the background, the way this framed out. I took a lot of shots, so I can't say that that exact framing was purposeful, but it certainly was cool to kind of expand, I think, my comfort zone a little bit and getting some of the backlight shots. Silhouettes are probably easiest in the sense that you can kind of max out some settings and get that hard silhouette, but what then becomes, I think, a little bit more challenging, you're pushing the settings beyond there. In a couple of these shots, I've actually maxed out some things. I'm at the lowest ISO. I'm at the highest shutter speed, and my apertures are bottomed out. So I'm at the point where I can't take I can't take a picture with any more light in it at this point in time. So that's why it's kind of important to get out there and get in position and kind of get ready for shots, because once that light hits that nice sweet spot, up until that point in time, you can't take pictures if it's in the evening, and vice versa in the morning. Once it gets too bright, you can't do that. The bottom left photo was just kind of impulse take. It was actually taken probably 4 hours into the morning. The sun was so bright, and I saw this egret sitting on a perch, and behind him was really, really dark because the shadows were up against the trees. And so I took the picture and just kind of highlighted the bird. I think that was kind of just a different take for me. It's not a shot I would have been able to take the year before. I do get questions occasionally about how much what I see in or what I'll post or what I'll show in a final image, how much does that reflect the original image? So there's a little, I guess, glance behind the curtain. The two left photos are obviously the raw image, and the ones on the right are the edited images. The ones on the left, you can see are darker. I underexpose almost all the time, purposefully so. It does a few things, most important of which, it really manages any kind of bright spots. If you get blown out, you can't backtrack. You lose that data. You can't. There's no way to recover it. So I underexpose oftentimes, and then kind of bring that up in post. The other kind of thing that you got to keep balanced here is color. Colors tend to show up better in underexposed images, and the more you tend to expose them, you lose some of that color. So that top image you'll see on the left, it actually has a little bit more of the pinks and blues that are just coming up. This is before the sun's even up, and some of that got washed out when you lighten it, but it does make it easier to see the bird. So trying to find that balance, and that can be a bit of a challenge. That was taken at the mouth of the Missisquoi, and then the bottom photos were taken at Swantown Beach, actually. I had some great collection of yellowlegs out there. And because the mountains in the background are really low, you do get some sun in there. So really nice peaks and blues on a few evenings during the season this year. I'll end here. These are a few of my favorite photos that I took this past fall. Top left one is a stilt. I just had some really nice sparkle on the water and was able to capture that. That was also at a Swantown Beach. The bottom left one was a launch shot. That's uncropped. I actually set that up just the way I wanted it to, and sat there for quite a while before that bird finally took off. And right when it did, was able to capture the image. The bottom right one was actually it's the same spot. It's just a different night. And that bird is actually vomiting a pellet I was not, I of course didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know yellow legs did that, but I guess they do. I was just set up watching these guys trying to catch some of those pinks, and then I saw this thing start just, and it looks like a cat. It just looks exactly like a cat. It starts to hack and finally spits this thing up, and I thought, I don't know, just distorted humor. I thought it was kind of cool. And speaking of weird sense of humor, the top right photo is a nice little semi-palmated plover sitting next to something that was left behind almost certainly by a Canada goose. And just the enormity of it compared to him, it kind of cracked me up. Front and center is probably my favorite photo from this past Shorebird season. I showed up this evening to Delta Park about an hour and a half before sunset, and went out there. Initially, just probably expecting some sandpipers or sanderlings. It's already turned stone. There's a few that come through every year. It's not a rare bird, but there's not a ton of them, so I thought that would be pretty cool to stick with. I sat with this bird for over an hour and a half after sunset. And this bird did not move more than about 30, 40 feet. Alternated between sitting and preening. He'd go and feed. Sandpiper would come and hit his turf. He'd chase them off. But stuck with this guy all the way to sunset. And this is as close as I could get to trying to put a bird inside the sun as I could possibly get on the lake with the Adirondacks in the background. I'm laying down in the water. I got the camera probably an inch above just to make sure it doesn't get hit by a wave. And shot this, as you can see, right as the sun is setting. I had a little bit of post work to do, but this was just the experience of being there and seeing this bird and getting some images that I was really proud of was pretty cool. So thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight, and to you guys, Julie and Rich and team, for asking us to participate in this.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Beautiful photos, and I've seen the improvement of your photos just the small time that I've known you. So I know the patience is what, there's obviously talent there, but the patience and the time that you guys put into getting these photos, it definitely pays off. So thank you for sharing your story and some of those amazing pictures of the shorebirds. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Rich to see if there are any questions that have come in for any of our presenters. And I know he wanted to share a little bit of information about our art show coming up in May, since we're talking about artists and photographers.
Yeah, well, if this did inspire anyone or motivate anyone to go out and start getting some artwork collected, we are bringing our art show back to a physical art show at the Refuge headquarters. We'll starting in May, and we should have information about registration and stuff up on our website here in the hopefully next week or so. So anyone that's looking to enter, or anyone just wants to see more artwork, we will hopefully are getting to be back in person. And then for questions that have come in, I think it was during Sandy's, but it may probably apply to anyone here. It's just about what kind of equipment and lenses people are using and what sort of stuff they would recommend, I guess. So I don't know if Sandy is still on or not, or if anyone wants to weigh in otherwise.
I'll jump in there. So I use a D500. Nikon D500. It shoots really quick, which is really helpful when you get action stuff going. My lens is a 2-500. It's a zoom lens. My 2 cents on equipment is to get really good at what you have until you outgrow the camera, and then talk about moving to a different camera, different lens. I started with a smaller camera, smaller lens, and I think that there's a lot you can learn with just any decent camera, any decent lens, before you get to a point that the difference in equipment is really going to make the difference in your image. I think there's a lot you can work on up to that point in time. That being said, most bird photographers, I think, use at least a 400 millimeter. You can probably get away with 300 with some bigger birds and maybe some close range, but I think you're probably looking at 400 or 500 millimeters for most bird photographers to get that range for small stuff.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that, especially if a few people tonight mentioned ethics of stuff, and you need longer reach if you can get it. The 600 f4s are really kind of pricey, but they do serve a purpose if you can swing it, because you don't want to be crowding birds out.
I'm a Nikon girl, so I have a 7500 and an 850 that I use interchangeably. And then the two, I have several lenses, but the two that I always go to are my 70 to 200 and then the 200 to 500. And that gives me, when I'm kayaking, the 70 to 200 is good because you're oftentimes coming upon a bird before you know it. And the 200 is plenty big enough.
Yep. Well, and a question for you, Angie, while you're there.
Oh, sure.
What some of your owls said they looked like they were eye level. Was that just the angle from where you were zooming from, or was that?
Well, it
where the trees
depended.
were?
It depended. The cavity was about 10 feet high, at least 10 to 12 feet high, I guess, up in the tree. But yeah, zooming, the beauty of zooming in, like I said, I always try to sit down, like I said, on the ground so that I'm not towering over anybody, and I am less of a threat. But there were times, yeah, I mean, when I came upon the baby, the first day he was out of the cavity, as I said, he was only about a couple of feet off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and of course, also in the woods too. You've got ground elevations too, so sometimes you can be
Yeah.
on eye level and something that's 10 feet up.
Funny you say that,
where you're
because
standing from.
yeah, they had done a well test not far from the cavity, so there was a little bit of a little hill there too that you could stand on.
All right. Well, we have definitely had a long evening. Great stories. I'm glad everybody stuck around with us. Thank you all for joining us. We really hope you're a little bit inspired to take out your own camera and go out there and try to get some shots yourself. The Refuge is definitely the perfect place to try. So we invite you to come on up to the Missisquoi and check it out up there. The trails are all open. And I think everybody that presented here tonight can attest to the beauty up there in pretty much all the seasons. You're guaranteed to see something. So thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out our websites for any upcoming events, and stay safe and warm. And we will see you all next time. Thank you.